Imagine a factory that breathes out smog and breathes in hope, where the air we pollute becomes the food we need. In a quiet corner of China, such a machine is already humming, proof that when the world says impossible, ingenuity simply says challenge accepted. And that same spirit, raw ambition, radical infrastructure, regional power, is now awakening across East Africa. Welcome to the coming era of industrial revolutions, resource revolutions, and visionary leaps. Over the past 40 years in China, a vast green wave has quietly moved across land once barren, absorbing nearly 400 million tons of CO₂ annually through large-scale afforestation and ecosystem engineering. But that alone wasn't enough. Scientists asked, what if the emissions could become value? What if CO₂ could be transformed into something humans need? In one breakthrough project, CO₂ captured from coal, gas, and steel plant exhausts is used in a bioprocess that turns it into yeast-based protein for animal feed. A single 10-hectare plant can produce around 100,000 tons of protein per year, output equivalent to 40,000 hectares of soybeans. In other words, air becomes feed, emissions become value, the intangible becomes indispensable. This is more than a technology, it's a mindset shift. Waste is no longer a liability, it's an asset. China is proving that the zero-sum game of reduce emissions versus grow economy can flip into turn emissions into commodities. And the world is going to take notice. When a country declares, we will industrialize, we will connect, we will export, you have to build the engines first. In China's case, this meant building the carbon capture systems, the yeast bioreactors, the protein factories that in Tanzania. The story is similar. Megaports rising from the coast, rail lines slicing through the interior, power plants lighting up towns that once lacked electricity. But there's an extra layer of meaning. What good is a factory if the fuel isn't there? What good is a rail network if the links aren't alive? In China's case, the fuel is captured carbon, the link is bioreactor to animal feed. The geography is industrial park, not safari in Tanzania. The model is equally bold. Infrastructure doesn't merely connect, it transforms. Imagine the narrative. We are building the rails, the ports, the energy, so that today's marginalized region becomes tomorrow's trade corridor. The credibility comes from the leap. Yes, it's audacious, but there's proof of concept in the world. Tanzania has long been celebrated for its wild beauty, the Serengeti, the coast, the hills, but now it aims to be more than a backdrop for tourism. It is pivoting from scenic to strategic. On the coastline, Megaport ambitions aim to open the Indian Ocean to inland Africa. Across the land, highways and railways seek to weave the interior into the global grid. In the power sector, hydropower, gas and renewables promise the energy to run not just lights, but entire industrial zones. This is the story of a country saying, we will not just export raw materials, we will manufacture, we will process, we will trade. And just like in the carbon-to-protein story, where a feed factory stands where smog once stood, in Tanzania the factory might stand where farmland, jungle, or dust once stood. The narrative is the same: transformation. Proof is everything. The Chinese project gives one form of proof: a biotech factory converting CO₂ into protein, approved by the government and moving toward scale. In Tanzania's case, proof is less singular but cumulative. New railway segments, port upgrades, energy projects under construction or planned. The stakes are high. If Tanzania succeeds, it becomes the bridge between the Indian Ocean and Africa's interior. If it falters, it risks expensive debt, half-built infrastructure, and unfulfilled promise. Just as the carbon utilization project in China must overcome scale, cost, safety, and regulation, Tanzania must overcome financing, governance, logistics, and environment. The engine rooms of transformation are not glamour, they are power plants, logistics hubs, training centers, supply chains. Those are the real stars. For East Africa, this is potentially the rise of a regional industrial powerhouse. A place where containers not only arrive but leave full of manufactured goods. A place where raw materials go in and finished goods come out. For investors and viewers, the narrative changes. This is not simply about safari or import of exotic goods or tourism. It is about value creation, trade corridors, regional leapfrogging. For citizens, the promise is jobs, training, access, connection. For the young generation, generation in Tanzania, this is the chance to not just be part of the global service economy, but to build, produce, export. And for the global climate moment, the best stories are not just of green trees or solar panels, but of systems that turn challenge into commodity, that turn dependence into empowerment. The year 2030 isn't far away, and for Tanzania, it's more than a date. It's a deadline for transformation, a finish line and a starting line at once. The country's Vision 2030 aims to lift Tanzania into middle-income status, an industrialized economy with modern infrastructure, stable power, and global trade connectivity. It's a bold vision shared by many developing nations, but what makes Tanzania stand out is that the blueprint isn't just political, it's physical. You can see it rising from the ground. Across the nation, the pieces of this vision are taking shape. At Bagamoyo, where fishing boats once dotted the horizon, cranes now swing steel beams for one of East Africa's most ambitious ports, a project designed to handle millions of tons of cargo a year and connect landlocked nations like Rwanda, Zambia, and the DRC to the sea. Across the plains, the standard gauge railway, DAR, hums with test trains, linking Dar es Salaam to Dodoma and further inland, the foundation of a trade route that will one day tie East and Central Africa together. Meanwhile, the Julius Nyerere Hydropower Project roars to life on the Rufiji River. When complete, it will generate over 2,000 megawatts, doubling Tanzania's total power capacity. Factories that once shut down at night due to outages will run 24/7. Cities will glow brighter, and for millions of people, electricity will no longer be a luxury, it will be a right. But even with this progress, the journey remains unfinished. 2030 will not be an endpoint, it will be a milestone. Many of these megaprojects will still be expanding, improving, evolving. The full picture might take another decade to unfold, but the direction will be irreversible. Once the ports are active, the rails connected, and the power grid stable, there's no turning back. Still, challenges loom. Debt sustainability, can the financing hold? Environmental impact, can development coexist with conservation? And most importantly, human capital. A nation's progress isn't just measured in steel and concrete, but in skills and opportunity. Will Tanzania's youth, its fastest-growing resource, be ready to run these systems, innovate, and lead? What's clear is that Tanzania's story mirrors the global energy of the 21st century, a race between ambition and reality, between what is and what could be. And in that race, it's no longer about whether Tanzania can reach its 2030 vision, but how far beyond it the nation can go. Because once a country learns to build, to connect, and to power itself, it doesn't stop, it accelerates. From smog-filled steel plants to high-protein yeast farms, from forest trenches in China to rail tunnels in Tanzania, we live in an era of conversion. Energy becomes industry, transport becomes trade, carbon becomes commodity. Tanzania is not simply dreaming, it is building. And while the full picture of 2030 is not yet finished, the first brush strokes are vivid. The question isn't if the transformation will happen, it's how fast, how deep, and how inclusive. And for the world watching, the question becomes, will you join the journey or stand on the sidelines? Because the industrial heartbeat of East Africa is already beginning to pound, and it's saying one thing: the future arrives here.